Now to our schools and a report out this month on the state of education in Michigan. It was done by Education Trust Midwest, which is a nonpartisan research and policy organization that tracks student learning here in Michigan. Now, there are some tough numbers here. We are one of only 6 states that actually posted learning losses in overall student performance in 4th grade reading since 2003. The state's rank on the national assessment has fallen in the past 10 years in 4th and 8th grade math and reading, but this trend just doesn't affect public schools in low-income urban areas. 10 years ago, Michigan's higher income students ranked above the national average in 4th grade reading and math and 8th grade reading. Today, in those same subjects, Michigan students rank 38th, 32nd, 31st, respectively. Across all groups of students, white, African American, Latino, low income, higher income, Michigan's student achievement rank has fallen in the last decade. And you can head to MiWeek.org for a link to this entire report. So what is happening to change some of these numbers? I mean, when you look at all of those statistics and you kind of crunch them together, it's not very encouraging.
Well, not enough is happening to change them yet. And if you look at this report, you see states like Tennessee and Florida who were 10 years ahead of us in terms of implementing reforms. We were talking about reforms, fighting about reforms, while they were putting good, solid classroom reforms in place. We still don't know what we want our education system to look like. We've got a dozen different models floating around, and that's good, and to a certain extent the parents have choice, but we still haven't settled on what will work. Meanwhile, in Tennessee, they've already established student assessments, teacher evaluation and training, consequences for not progressing. In Michigan, we put some basic reforms in on tenure a year or two ago. Half the school districts still haven't implemented them.
You know, I think reform means many different things to many different people, though, Stephen.
It does, and that's part of the problem with education, is that we end up fighting about definitions and political points of view rather than talking about what works in classrooms. In the states that have, you know, rocketed ahead while we were lagging, they have been able to get past all of those issues. Florida is a great example. Jeb Bush, you know, not a governor that I had an awful lot of agreement with on a lot of issues, but on this one, I mean, he was absolutely right to push for what he did, and he got Republicans and Democrats together to support these changes. Tennessee is another state that has made remarkable progress, but then you can look at, you know, states in the Northeast, Maryland and Massachusetts, which which lead the nation in the way they manage these things, are also states that have overcome the traditional obstacles to get that stuff into place. I mean, I saw it in Maryland. I watched that unfold as a Republican school superintendent, state superintendent, worked with Democratic governors to figure it all out. We just can't do it.
So what's going on in Lansing right now? Because they're talking about some funding and some projects right now. What kind of decisions do they have to make, though?
We're still trying to figure out whether to put the teacher evaluation model in place that the University of Michigan and others developed for them. It's a good model, but you know, this is what happens here. Good reforms are proposed, good people put together plans and proposals, and the legislature goes up there, fights about them, waters them down. The MEA gets involved, and all of a sudden we're talking about something other than what's best for the kids. We still spend a lot of time in Lansing talking about what's best for adults and the people who have their hands in the system. These other places have united behind pushing their kids ahead.
So who is the leader of uniting that front? Where does that come from? Does that come from the governor? Does that come from the state superintendent? Does that come from larger districts that band together? Or where do we then see that leadership come from?
I think in other states what you would see is that there is a stronger partnership between the governor and the state superintendent than we have seen here in the last decade. I mean, Superintendent Flanagan is strong in some ways, but has not been able to forge the kind of...
Well, because he doesn't work for the governor, and it's
well,
the
that's
structure
also
here.
true, right? The structure doesn't
really
work.
need a constitutional change. The state school superintendent should work for the governor. There should be that
report
level
to
of
the,
accountability.
right.
Instead, he appoints to an elected state school board that is wholly in the pocket of the unions, of the education unions. That's why this doesn't work. That's why we have so much struggle getting ahead. We need to wipe out that elected board, have a state superintendent who appoints for the governor, is appointed by the governor, and the governor is accountable for his performance.
Well, I know that a lot of parents and teachers will be watching what happens and what decisions are being made in the next couple of weeks.